Welcome back. I'm Brian Calfano, joined by our familiar faces, Ozark's first contributors, Amy Blancett and Nick Reed. Guys, good to see you.
Hi.
And earlier this week, we had another round of elections, off-year elections in various states, Mississippi, Virginia, and Kentucky. And some mixed results, but leaning toward good news for the Democrats, better news than I think some were expecting. And of course, the tendency then is to always try to read the tea leaves and say, this means such and such for President Trump next year. The pundits are saying the Virginia takeover by the Dems and the likely win of the Kentucky governorship by Democrat Andy Beshear means Trump's done. Your thoughts?
I think that is an incorrect analysis. I think that never has there been more of a disconnect between a party's failure and success and the president of that party, if that makes any sense.
So in other words, Trump is off to the side and his success or failure rests with him.
Well, let's talk about Kentucky first off. And I think there are a lot of misconceptions. There was a whole slate of candidates there. And but for the exception of that Democrat seat, Republicans swept everything. In fact, the Attorney General, first African-American Attorney General in the history of Kentucky ever elected, that was the first Republican to win that seat in decades. There have only been, I think, 2 Republican governors in Kentucky's last 60 years. None has ever won re-election, and this guy, he was 15 to 20 points behind in the polls leading up to the election, the Republican was. So the fact that, I mean, if you want to look at or gauge Trump's impact, he came in and it closed the gap to 0.4%. Now, if you're looking at Trump's
and the
impact,
guy you're talking about, Matt Bevin, ended up winning more votes than he won in his first time out. So it's hundreds of thousands of more votes.
And neither Republican or Democrat got 50%. You had a Libertarian in there that grabbed 2, so they both, tied.
And as of tonight, that race is actually still yet to be called because it's so close.
Exactly. So now a win is a win, but to look at that and say, and it has been presented like this is huge for Democrats. Every historical standard shows you that that Democrat should have easily won. And his father was a very, very popular governor prior to the current governor. So, some people will say it's rationalizing, but given that there were some historic wins by Republicans there and that highly unpopular governor came that close to winning, to me, that is not bad news for Republicans.
All right, but let me push on that for just a second, because Bevin, the governor there, was very unpopular by doing a lot of things that candidates and politicians often don't do, like publicly humiliate public school teachers, for example.
Right.
A style of leadership different, not so much from President Trump, and not public school teachers as an example, but saying things that his predecessors probably would not have said in office, and maybe alienating some folks who were going, oh, that's too much for our politics, it's too negative, that kind of thing. Do you think the president runs the same risk given his style? He has a lot of fans out there by virtue of his directness. Didn't, but now he's got a record, and he's done more of it potentially. You could argue he's done much more of it as the actual president versus the candidate.
And he's done much more against the recommendation of those around him, asking him to rein that in, because it gives easy ammo and those kinds of things to where we're looking for our leadership to have educated language, present well. So it's still really confusing to me on how Republican parties are standing behind even the way he is presenting. I mean, our conversation isn't necessarily directly at Trump at this moment, looking at what's happening. But I think when we are talking about what we expect from our governors, knowing that ultimately they think about moving forward, we do have to think about what is it that they're saying, and is it mimicking something else that I think we're getting enough of and beginning to turn off?
Well, but I think that this is an example of the real divide that is there. There are a lot of people that do worry about how does it look, how does it sound. And I think a lot of Americans have been fed up with what they felt. They weren't being really represented, but it sure looked pretty. They were very diplomatic. They talked nice. And so this guy comes along who they feel right or wrong, actually is not one of everybody else. And he doesn't care about talking like everyone else. And they're like, yes, finally, this is what we've been saying.
But he is like everyone else.
And hang on, these are the same folks who are worried about the culture, and they're worried about the kinds of ideas we put in our kids' heads and that sort of thing. As the president, being as sort of gruff as he is, that doesn't have an effect on the culture that a lot of conservatives wouldn't like.
But you see, and this is what I think conservatives too, they feel like they've been on the receiving end of this for so long. They've been called every name under the book. And so they're like, and I agree with this assessment, the idea that all of a sudden politics has become name calling because of Trump. No. It's just been very one-sided for a very, very long time.
Flipped,
yeah, and
sure.
Trump and a lot of Republicans and conservatives who don't necessarily, that tenor would not be their go-to. They're so grateful that finally someone is standing up for them in that same way. And they aren't being told by the party, well, you just need to take it. We need to be above this. They were tired of being whipped all the time. And so it's like a kid who is constantly picked on in school, and there's a new kid in school who's big, and he decides to take him under his wing. That kid's so grateful for it. Like, somebody's finally standing up for me and hitting them back. There's a real appreciation there that people have.
Amy, 30 seconds, last
Well,
word.
I think what's unfortunate about what's happening is that, again, instead of finding a middle ground and figuring out how do we work together, because swinging right and then swinging left is not a great way for us to come together and continue to govern. So we're beginning to see a huge push and a lot of money behind Democrats who are being told that they're, extremely one-sided or the other, instead of trying to figure out how do we not have this massive shift blue to where we go back to bullying red, and then we have a massive shift red and we go back to bullying blue. Like, at what point are we going to say, how do we, again, come from a common ground in the middle to say, how do we equally and evenly tax to make sure that our roads are built, to make sure that our teachers are paid, to make sure that the infrastructure that we need to exist happens? And what's going to be really interesting is as our population begins to decrease, because we're not reproducing at the same rate, and infrastructure and taxes are needed, Maine is now recruiting individuals to move to Maine. Are they recruiting individuals with a specific political view that are going to support increased taxes because that's what they're asking for? So we're seeing some really interesting dynamics and shifts as our population begins to change. And if we don't come together and find something in the middle, we're just going to keep dogging each other, fighting each other in the playground, and nothing really gets done.
All right, let's save this for our Thanksgiving Eve show. Because, there's going to be lots of fighting.
Lots of this.
Around the family table coming up. Anyway, folks, thanks. Appreciate it. Amy Blanchett, Nick Reed. We'll be right back.